Hi everyone, and welcome to this exciting new podcast for the first year students in sections 2 and section 4. In this podcast, we're going to cover the weeks of November 6th, November 13th, and November 20th. So, lots to cover. Let's dive right in. If you have not already done so, go and get your agenda or your calendar or your phone, or however it is that you are keeping yourself organized. If you don't yet have a system for keeping yourself organized, remember that Carrie gave us 2 great resources in her workshop last week, and these have been uploaded onto Omnivox. So she gave us a calendar that shows the remaining weeks of the semester. Gasp, that was a little bit scary when we saw that, but that can be very helpful in helping you keep track of everything you have to do between now and the end of the semester. And then she also gave us this handy weekly schedule where you can break down all the stuff you have to do in any given week. So both of those documents are available on Omnivox as part of the documents for the observing course, for my observing course. All right, so let's talk assignments, people. Here is your master schedule for the weeks in question, and let's start by looking at the week of November 6th. So, Jean is asking you to please read Chapter 6 for Monday in Affective Relationships, Chapter 6 on the topic of resilience, a very important topic. For my observing course, can you please read Chapter 13 of the textbook and review the PowerPoint on the topic of planning to observe? Because on Monday, your groups will meet and have a strategy session for the group observation plan assignment. And by the end of that meeting, you should be prepared to observe in the lab. And so please, on Monday, bring anything you think you'll need to that meeting. Any documents, any resources, any lists, textbooks, articles, and also you might want to consider bringing a computer if you think that will help you guys come up with everything you need, because on Wednesday, it will be week 1 of the observation for the group observation assignment. So that's very important, one of those week 1 of that assignment. And then also remember that the lab sections will be flipped on that Wednesday. So that's Wednesday, November 8th. Your lab sections are flipped. And then that afternoon, Wednesday, November 8th, we will have time in class for you to work again on your group observation plan and to start writing up the report for that assignment. In your Intro to ECE class, your past day reflection paper, that's the paper you wrote about your daycare visit, that will be due on Thursday, November 9th, and that is worth 20% of your final grade. So an important assignment there. All right, let's next look at the week of November 13th. For affective relationships, Jean is asking you to please read Chapter 10. That's on the topic of self-regulation. How do educators communicate their expectations and their rules to young children to help them start to self-regulate? So an important chapter there. On Monday, November 13th, in my observing class, we will have time again to work on the group observation plan and the report. And then on the Wednesday of that week, so Wednesday, November 15, will be the second and final week of gathering observations in the lab, and the lab sections are unflipped for that day, so back to the regular schedule. On that afternoon, we will have more in-class time to work on finalizing the group observation plan assignment and on to start work on the analysis assignment. So important days to come to the observing course in the next couple of weeks. On the Wednesday and the Thursday of that week, you will be doing your presentations about your daycare visits, and that presentation is worth 5%. Alrighty, finally, let's look at the week of November 20th. Jean is asking you to read Chapter 11, also on the topic of self-regulation, but Chapter 11 is about what do you do when young children don't comply with your rules and expectations. How do educators use consequences to guide young children towards greater self-regulation? So also an important chapter. In my observing course, your group observation plan assignment is due, and that is worth 20% of your final grade. So lots going on in those 3 weeks. If you have any advice, suggestion, tips, tools that you would like to share with your fellow students about staying organized and managing time effectively and efficiently, please send those ideas to me, and you may be featured in a future podcast, and you could become a podcast star. And speaking of podcast stars, here are a few photos from Halloween 2017. So here is Officer Marissa. We've got a very cute unicorn, Kelsey, with her newly shaven head. Ralu and her donut. We've got a cute pair of costume people here, Jessica and Alessia, who, as it turns out, are friends in real life. We've got Marie-Pierre as a fairy. We've got Kelly and baby Jade. Here is another cute pair of costumed people, Christina and Jessica, a couple of the second-year fast trackers. And Jenna and her Halloween orange socks. And then this pair came to my office trick-or-treating, but ended up giving me candy. So that's Kelsey and Rinalini. So nice to see those costumes. As usual, post any comments on YouTube after you viewed the podcast. Remember that you can get a full transcript underneath the video if you are distracted by my face. And as always, stay tuned for the next announcement, because that will mean that a new podcast has been uploaded for you, and that will probably be the last podcast of this semester. So that's it. Have a great week, everybody, in Section 2 and Section 4. Bye.